Hello, people in the internets. I don't know who's watching or if anyone's watching yet, but unfortunately, I was just going to say, unfortunately, Ben couldn't join us yet, but there's
Hello.
Ben, just in time, just barely in time, only a handful of seconds late. So yeah, this is for anyone who doesn't know, this is Friends on Books thing I like to do on my channel. The original idea was basically I was looking out at BookTube land and seeing all of these lovely people who seem so nice in their videos and so friendly, and it also feels like maybe it's a bit of a family. A lot of people kind of know each other and whatever, and I didn't know anybody. So I wanted to do a series of live videos with booktubers that I've never talked to directly before. I mean, I think all three of us have had interaction online somewhere, but never talked directly to any of you before, and get to know people. So I've invited these two guys, and this random woman seems to have gotten the link and logged into the stream because Kay has shoulder length hair.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know what happened to her. She's gone. I'm taking over.
All right, fair enough. Why don't we start with you? Why don't you introduce yourself, Kay,
Sure.
and tell us about your sexy new haircut.
So yeah, I don't talk about books or anything. No, my name is Kayla. I have a channel called Kay's Hidden Shelf, and I do the usual booktube stuff. I read fantasy, sci-fi, and a smattering of other genres, and do author interviews and just talk about books and liking stories and all of that jazz. And yeah, new pixie cut. Yay.
You realize you're going to have to change your logo now.
I do. You know what? Photoshop is great for that. I'm just gonna the hair on the logo.
Yeah, I was watching, like, just to sort of get my head in the mood. I watched some of all three of your latest videos like an hour ago, and the one where you announced the pixie cut, and the first one where we see it, and then the logo comes up, and I was like, oh yeah, gonna have to do something about that. So
So we'll play a game then. Whoever notices the updated logo first wins a chocolate bar. I don't know.
a
They
pixie
win
cut.
credit.
Cool. Let's move around clockwise, at least on my screen. Colin.
Hi, I am Colin from Colin's Corner, and I don't know if I can even consider myself a booktuber anymore because it's been almost a month since I've posted a video.
Oh man, am I gonna have to kick
you might have to kick me. No, I do typical, I guess if we're going to say typical booktuber stuff, I do wrap-ups, TBRs, try to do book reviews, and kind of just whatever excites me. Sometimes I like to do like I just recently did a video of 5 fantasy worlds I'd like to hang out in because I thought that would be fun. So yeah, I just I've been really behind on BookTube because I am trying to not be behind on life recently. But these discussions are nice because I get to hang out with people and still talk about books, which I love to do.
And you don't have to edit anything.
Right.
That's my favorite thing about them, other than talking to people.
Yep.
It's like, it's done.
Yeah.
If it's a 2-hour conversation, it's quicker than shooting my videos usually is. And
oh yeah,
there's no hours of editing afterwards. It's awesome. So Ben, tell us about you and your channel.
Well, I'm Ben from Books with Genghis Khan, a very poor pun with something that I thought would be in the speculative fiction realm. I guess with Genghis Khan, even though he's a real person, but it's hard to find my channel unless you get a link because it'll automatically search for Books with Genghis Khan. Even if you type in my thing correctly.
I searched it today when I wanted to go to your channel. I mean, I have you subscribed, but I didn't want to scroll through the subscription list. I just searched and I was like, this goes somewhere else entirely.
Yeah. I had the same trouble trying to search for Library of Alexandria years ago.
Yeah.
And then you have to click on this tiny 8-point font thing that's like, did you actually want to search for what you typed in? So YouTube's very, very helpful on that. But yeah, I've been I have a channel that I've also been struggling to be consistent with. It's so busy recently, but been going for about a year and a half or a little bit more, and really enjoying it. And I wanted to throw my hat in the ring, most of all, just so I could start getting in on more of these types of live conversations. And I've been doing an amazing kind of buddy read series with Colin through Realm of the Elderlings, and that's been a highlight of my whole booktube experience so far. Going through Live Ship and Tawny Man with Colin, and now Rainwild Chronicles. We're making our way through there steadily. But yeah, I've been so consumed in my like free time hobby life the last 5 years with reading fantasy and sci-fi books. It's just completely taken over my life. Like my reading habit was almost dying off in those kind of years post college when I had a full-time job and was just reading more realistic fiction or literary stuff, classics, and I was still liking those, but they weren't kind of capturing my heart and my full engagement. And I was reading just a couple books a year until I discovered adult modern fantasy and sci-fi, and it was just invigorating and felt like I was a kid again reading Harry Potter. And I've just been steadily reading more and more kind of every day, listening to audiobooks, reading, and almost fully just fantasy and sci-fi stuff, or occasional historical fiction too.
Cool. Maybe quickly, that's a good starter question, since like I said, the point is kind of to get to know you all. Start with Kay again. When and why did you start your booktube channel?
So it's been 2 years now. So I think I started 2021. And basically at that point, I was at the end of my maternity leave. And I had given in my resignation. And it was the first time in like 13, 15 years that I wasn't working and staying home as a mom. That was, as much as I love my child, I need more interaction than red, blue, go like cars and stuff like that. And I had
One fish.
been, well, yeah, stimulation, right? And adult conversation and meeting friends, right? That was another part. But I had watched BookTube for years before that. And so I was in the Discords. I was in the Nerdy Narrative, Andrew's Wizardly Reads. Like, I knew all of those people. I was chatting with the Discords. And Evie was actually the one that kind of helped push me to start the channel, as well as my husband. He was just like, do it. You've nap times, just make little videos, learn how to edit. And so that's kind of where it started for me was, seeing everyone else do it. I wanted to throw my hat in too, but it took a long time for me to get the courage to do it.
I've always wanted to ask you, do you have like a super like powerful or expensive microphone? Because the audio quality on your on your videos are just coming from your microphone right now. It just sounds so amazing. Is it like
That's just Kay's awesome voice.
Or is that just your voice?
Kay is like the best female voice on BookTube, like hands down. And everybody I know has said that. They're just like, I could listen to Kay all day long.
So we'll talk about yes, this is a Shure microphone, so it is one of the more expensive ones. But talk about things like starting a channel. I would never have thought my voice would be the thing that people took to. That was I hate my voice the same as most people, right? So the fact that people enjoy my voice is fantastic. I have no clue why, but great, thank you.
When I was 19, I asked my dad, I was studying like design in university. I didn't own a computer. And I asked my dad, I was like, could you help me out? Could you support me and buy me a computer? And he was like, he's a businessman, or he was a businessman. So nothing is just like, yeah, sure, I'll give you a gift. He was like, prove to me that you need it. What are you doing? Show me some of your work or something. So I made a video with all these animations I'd done in the computer lab at school, and I did a voiceover on this tape, and I sent him back in the day in the post a VHS cassette, right? And sent him this, and he watched it and he called me and he was like, yeah, about that computer. Your stepmother and I have decided you should actually quit your degree and go into radio.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
Just because he'd never like, just because of listening to my voice, he'd never listened to my voice that way, just like without sitting there talking to me. And he said, "We really like your voice. You should go into radio." I'm like, "No, I'm not going to go into radio. Can I have a computer?" He was like, "Yeah, yeah." Okay. So, anyway, Colin, when and why did you start your channel?
Okay. January 28th would have marked 1 year since I started my channel, so we're just past the year mark.
Okay.
Similarly to Kay's BookTube channel history, I was involved in watching BookTube probably since I want to say end of 2018, 2019. And got to know many of the people virtually, became familiar with and made myself familiar in people's comment sections, discovered that people used Discord for things other than gaming and joined some of the Discords. And there was a couple reasons I eventually decided to move forward with it. A is that I don't have a lot of friends in my real life that read the types of books that I read, and I can only express my excitement so much to my wife, who does not read the books that I read, and where she can pretend to care. It also doesn't land the same when I'm like freaking out about book 4 of some series, and I can't possibly convey that to her and share that experience.
Yeah.
If she hasn't read it. So Discord is good for that because people are very responsive and excited when other people are reading books they're reading. But ultimately, I hadn't done anything in a long time that kind of scared me, like made me nervous and stepped out of my comfort zone. And I'm currently going to school to become a teacher. And so I figured it would be good to show my daughter that you can express yourself in healthy ways on the internet and pursue passions that you have and not be ashamed of them. And B, I thought it would help me to articulate my thoughts and be able to verbalize them in a way that will probably benefit me as a teacher. Plus all these little skills that we learn, like editing and recording, will be beneficial in this technological age to make my classroom more fun. And it will have a cool little space on the internet to show people that I do care about books and I love to talk about them. So that's eventually what pushed me over. I was like, you know what? Let's do it.
So you're almost class of 2022, like me and Ben. You're 2022, yeah, Ben?
yeah.
Yeah. So what got you started? What made you take the leap, so to speak?
Oh man, kind of similar. Had been watching for years. It's funny, just like the sequence of me getting more and more involved in the kind of online fantasy fandom community, where I started as my real life friend who never stopped reading fantasy, who grew up reading Harry Potter, but then he just kept on going with Song of Ice and Fire and Dark Tower and things. But he kind of eventually just forced me to try Mistborn, and I got so into just Sanderson's books, and then from there I was like, okay, I want to find some other things. I went on like Sanderson's fan forums to see like, oh, what else are the Sanderson fans reading in the fantasy genre and liking, and that's how I found Temeraire and the Magician's Trilogy and Dresden Files, and just from there I'm like, all right, let's see what's on YouTube, and immediately find Daniel Green, and he's the biggest one. So I'm like, I was starting to take his opinions as gospel, and had some luck with that early on with First Law, but then just really did not mesh with some of his favorites at the time, like Lightbringer series or Pop Your Trilogy or Book of the Ancestor. Really like feeling like, oh, I'm developed my own kind of taste here. That separate from that, I'm branching out to finding others like Mike's book reviews. Been watching Mike for so many years, and then finding Library of Alexandria and Jimmy at the Fantasy Network kind of become my core booktubers for years. And then just as more and more people came on, after 2020 and 2021, it's like, wow, so many people are starting channels. It's just like, I've been watching it for years at that point, feeling like, oh, now I've read a lot and I have some things to say and might get my own top 10 list out there, and I think they'd be worthwhile and different from other people's. And then seeing a lot of these live chats happening, like or Alan's Jeopardy, like I felt like I wanted to go on there or just chat about books, in spoiler ways or these general conversations. Like I just wanted to join, since I don't have too much of that chance in my own kind of life with people around to do that with. So I think a lot of the same reasons, just wanting to just be more of part of the community, and like Colin's saying, do something a little bit uncomfortable but thrilling at the same time, and seeing how it can grow and how you can improve at it and get better. And when you articulate thoughts, like even if it's in a review or a wrap-up video or in a live chat, you're often in the act of articulating and actually forming thoughts that are semi-coherent and and just with language. You are maybe coming to new understandings. It's not just that you're conveying things you thought about before, but you really are learning new things from other people and from your own understanding you're developing as you're articulating. And so I've been finding it really fun just to do wrap-ups, almost keep a video reading diary. And so I like that aspect of it. And showing off books on book hauls is fun. And yes, and then having the spoiler chats on certain books is also, it enriches that reading experience so much. So that's
absolutely
a lot of reasons there. But I definitely did not go into this wanting to have it be a moneymaker or to blow up, and you have to be so consistent and post so many videos to really grow the channel in that way. But just as a hobby, where when there's some spare time and I have the energy, hopefully get one out a week and keep, or if not, that's okay. Because but just to stay,
that's good to hear.
Yeah.
It's good to hear that it's okay, because I was also kind of aiming at a 1 a week schedule, and this week I didn't quite manage. But I say I've got 2 live streams this weekend, so it's not too dramatic. Yeah, no, one of the things you said really resonates with me, because I would say that's one of the main reasons it takes so long for me to record. When I start recording is I'm someone who I think doesn't think as much in his head as in his mouth. Like very often when I'm talking to a friend about a subject, I'll realize things that I think because I said them. And wasn't necessarily super clearly conscious of it beforehand, but then I say it and it feels true, or it feels right, And very often I'll start talking about a book and I'm like, I think this and this and this. And I'm like, oh, it didn't occur to me before that I thought that about this book. I need to stop recording and think about this a little more. It's a real process. Are you guys like, some people when they record videos, whether it's BookTube or anything, have a very clearly worked out, not necessarily word for word script, but a clear plan going into the video, and then record it just like that and then done? Or are you a bit more like, I'm just going to talk about some stuff and it's probably going to be stupid and I'll do it 3 times and cut out the junk and move on to the next subject and do the same thing again? And how's your planning on your videos?
I mean, I would say I'm the opposite, in the sense of all my thoughts are up here, and then the articulation is book good, read please. So I really need to kind of sit down, write down my thoughts. And
can you do like a month of videos that are like that? Where you just hold up a book and say, book good, read please.
I'll do some shorts for you.
Okay. Read maybe.
Yeah.
Something like that.
New reviews style.
Yeah.
So for reviews, when I'm doing those kind of videos, they are typically scripted, or at least have bullet points so that I don't forget anything. I'm the type of person to lean on the side of brevity. So I'm used to not going super in depth with things or talking super in depth. So those points, those bullet points, or at least the outline helps, but also time management is huge. I don't have a whole lot of time to sit in front of a camera and attempt it 3 or 4 times. Even a second time, I had this happen yesterday. I recorded a video only to realize 30 minutes in, the camera wasn't recording. So that was lovely.
That's happened to everyone, I believe.
Yes. So yeah, typically I try at least, even if so for the indie spotlight, for example, I'll have a list of the books that I want to talk about, some bullet points, and then I'll mix in whatever random gobbledygook comes out of my mouth. But yeah, apart from that, I think uh, at least in terms of ensuring I don't sound absolutely mad or the videos are completely boring, scripting helps. And then for time, it also helps to cut on editing as well.
Yeah, that I mean, I'm still looking forward to a day that may never come when I do words better and like don't make weird mouth
Yeah.
noises
Yeah.
constantly
Yeah.
and have really long pauses. I have this habit of going and like or so, and it's just dumb in a video. You know, nobody wants to listen to that. And I'll just continually catch myself doing that, and then I'll like, okay, I'm going to start that sentence or that section over again and try not to do that stupid sound again.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I have so many little edits I need to make in basically every video recording just to get out that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous of the like one take people like Mike's book reviews or Matt's fantasy book reviews, who are barely doing any cuts.
Mike can talk for like there was actually one video where I commented on it. It was actually Josh from Red Fury Books. Josh talked about 16 books in one take and didn't make a weird noise or have an uncomfortable pause or anything the whole time. And just like as I was watching it, after like 5 books, it occurred to me, and then I was just like, Josh, are you okay? How do you do that? And I wrote in the comments, I was like, dude, you didn't cut anything, did you? Like there were no edits in your entire video and it didn't sound stupid. I can't do that.
No, I'm the same. And Matt, if I'm doing a wrap up, I have my stack of books here, and then I get my thoughts out on the book. I'm like so just relieved that I'm like, oh, I got them all out, semi-articulate, and like, man, okay, I need a little bit of rest here to regroup until I can gather my thoughts on the next book.
But don't you immediately
yeah.
after, like when you say, okay, that's in the can, it's ready to go, I'll edit it and everything, and then you sit down 5 minutes later and you're like, but I didn't say that.
Yes, totally.
There was this essential thing I didn't say.
I'm like, should I go back and refilm? Should I go back and set it up again? Like, oh, I can cut it. Like, I have that all the time.
Every time I shoot, kills me. I'm like, the most important point about the book is the thing I didn't say.
Yep.
I'm an idiot. Damn it.
I think that's why quite a few people have the editing version of themselves in like that little vlog style recording, because they likely did the same and they went, you know what? I'm just gonna record really quick. Forgot this, clip it in.
I do that. I do that in a lot of my videos, and it is literally the editing mat, because I'm sitting there editing. I've got my headphones on for editing, and I just grab my phone and record quickly something and cut it in. Yeah, it's so annoying. Stupid. What about you, Colin? Are you a planner?
Yeah, I'm a planner. I think, like with probably all of us, I've learned to. I mean, this is a massive process. Most of the advice before I even started my channel, when I was considering it, was like, dude, just record a video. Like, just get a video out there, because that's really the biggest first hurdle. So one day I was bored and tired of dragging my feet and mentioning this, and I went and bought a $20 tripod at Walmart, and I set my phone up and I recorded my intro video and I put it out. And I was so nervous to put it out and release it and have it be like live to the public. But since then, it's just been kind of, and this is an ongoing process, I feel, for everybody that's doing anything creative, but it's just kind of been honing the craft, figuring out what I like to do, how I like to present things. And that is changing, but usually, especially for reviews, not so much for wrap-ups and TBRs, I will literally script out everything that I want to say because it helps me organize my thoughts. I don't use that script to read off of it, but similar to the discussing with somebody, like a spoiler discussion, when I'm just like kind of sitting there typing out my thoughts on a book, trying to do it in some kind of chronological order and touch on themes, characters that stood out to me, I realize things about the book that I would not have said if I would have just set my camera up and recorded. Not that that would have been bad or that ever is bad.
Yeah.
But I think the act of actually like basically writing a book review, which I never post anywhere, helps me to organize my thoughts. And then I'll kind of bullet point that when I actually go to record. But I have the typed out version there so I can reference it, but I don't read it. And that's typically how I do, especially reviews. But like the lists and wrap ups, TBRs, they're really just bullet points. Like this book, brief thoughts. This book, brief thoughts. And then I have that pulled up so I can just kind of reference it. But I've not recorded one video where I didn't plan anything and just set my phone up.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I always bullet. I basically do what you do, but I skip all the writing part. So, but it's good advice. I might actually try that next time I need to, especially for like a proper review. Just write it out to get my thoughts together. Usually, I just have a bullet point list, and it's sometimes like bullet characters, and I know what that means. But
if I just did that, I'd probably record a lot more videos, because once I have the videos planned in my notes, I am much more excited to record them, and then I record them. And the reason that I haven't recorded a video for like 2.5 weeks now is because I don't have one actually scripted out, ready to go right now. And the fact that I have to sit there is daunting to plan it out and then record it, because I just don't have the time with school right now.
Right.
To do it. Don't have the time is one way to say it. I haven't made the time, rather.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I'm being a hard ass, I always say everybody has time for anything, but you have to prioritize that thing. And
when I've been really tired
that
recently,
means unprioritizing other things.
Yeah. And if you're tired out from work or school or both, then like what I had time for was just vegging and like listening to Dungeon Crawler Carl audiobooks. Like that's what I had time for all of January.
You've been doing that a lot.
Yeah.
I watched all your videos, and that's like all you've been doing. It sounded like you were like Dungeon Crawler Carl, Dungeon Crawler Carl, Dungeon Crawler Carl, and there was
No, seriously, I was in such a comfort zone with it. I just moved into kind of a new role at work as kind of doing something like very different for my education company, where I was mostly just an academic tutor before with working with kids. And now I'm more in a upper management role and training new instructors. And I just my work just doubled all of a sudden. I was doing 2 jobs for a while and I was so tired. Like I did not have energy to like pick up anything that was like a little bit dense. And so the Dungeon Crawler Carl audios were just perfect for that whole time period. But I recently it's been calming down a little bit and I've been sleeping more. And I was able to start Song for Our Bone by Guy Gabriel Kay, my first K. And man, it's like I've not read prose like this in many years that I felt like was really elegant and kind of just dense in terms of the word choice and like unexpected sentence structures and things where I had to pay more attention to it, like much more so even than Erickson or Hobb prose. I just felt like it needed more energy.
Is the man for complex, rich prose. Yeah.
But I just could not do that at all last month. But this month I'm really liking Song for Our Bone now. And so I have the mental energy. So it's not just the time for recording a booktube video or for what we read. It's like, just, do we have the energy for something a little bit more challenging or something new? Or because when you're tired out, you just want to watch like a TV show. I did some of that too. And that was, I rarely do that, but that new brother son show is like a realistic version of Greenbone Saga. and it was really fun. It was really fun.
I watched that actually. Yeah. No, I've seen that, and it also reminded me a lot of Greenbone Saga. I mean,
Yeah.
no Jade magic or anything, but yeah, it's
It would have been
basically
so much
a
cooler,
Taiwanese triad family, you know. And one of the sons is a normal nerd in high school who doesn't really know about the whole triad business, and they bring him in, and yeah, it has a lot of parallels.
Yeah, so that's like kind of like the Andin character, and then there's like a Hilo character. It's like if Hilo was transplanted into this other story. It's wild. Yeah. It was like they must have read Greenbone Saga because it feels like they just stole the character of Hilo. And
the higher level of the family is quite different. Like the parents and all of that is quite different than in Greenbone, but it does have some parallels. Yeah.
But man, when you're kind of low energy, you just and binging a TV show like that could just be what the doctor ordered. But now I'm back to doing something a little bit new and hard with Guy Gabriel K. And man, I am blown away by the quality of the writing and just the depth of the character work and just it's similar to Hob in a lot of ways, but you definitely have to be in more of like that mindset or mood for that kind of read versus one of just the lighter reads.
It's not fast food.
Easier to sink into. Yeah.
It's a gourmet meal in a way, and you want your palate to be ready for it and really have the time to savor it and appreciate it. Yeah. I'm curious, Kay and Colin, have you guys read any progression fantasy or lit RPG?
Yes, some.
Okay.
I am trying my first right now.
Okay. I tried Dungeon Crawler Carl, and so many people said on the audiobook that it was just so good, that the audiobook is really well done, and it is. But I don't. It left me feeling like I'm just too old for it or something. I don't know. I mean, I think regardless of my age, I think I have a pretty young mind, and I'm into lots of younger, nerdy, geeky things. But I don't know. Like it's basically a guy playing a dungeon crawler video game, but he's actually in a dungeon. And the first bit of the book, I thought, oh, this is sort of like Hitchhiker's Guide. You know, it's quite light and funny, and the comedy's not bad and all of that. And once I got to the dungeon, I was like, why would I read this instead of playing a video game? I was just confused the whole time. And the further into it I went, I was like, I still just want to play a video game.
Yeah. Interestingly, I've never really played RPGs like this, like with stats or any kind of thing like that.
Maybe that helps.
So
because I know all that stuff backwards.
Yeah.
You know, I know all that stuff in and out. And
so
I'm like, this is just describing someone playing a video game. Why?
It is also my first lit RPG, and people in the lit RPG community, they say it's one of the lightest on the actual like lit RPG elements and stat stuff. And
really,
so yeah.
I mean, he's like walking down a dungeon corridor, and he imagines something, and a menu pops up in front of him.
Yeah,
in the air, like in his mind, in the air or whatever. And I'm like, this is just a video game. There isn't any writing happening. It's just describing a video game.
It is completely different than the usual stuff. It is wacky. Oh my God. For sure. I could understand people just not being able to get past the video game elements, but it is what surprised me about it was I thought it was just going to be like they're in like a video game, but it's a real life high stakes situation they're in where, you know, people are dying, their lives are at stake, and it's this like really advanced like civilization that's kind of brought this reality show dungeon to Earth, where this very sophisticated, it's like complete sci-fantasy stuff, where this AI is basically able to create an enhancement zone around the planet to allow for like all these video game enhancements. But so it's an interesting mix of like, it is a video game, but it's also real for those people in there. And so there's always high stakes. So it's not like they can die and they have a certain number of lives, or until they get a game over. It's just
yeah,
like
you can't.
they all just have the one life. They all just
Yeah.
have the one life. It's super high stakes in that way. So that surprised me because I thought it was going to be actually more video game like going in, whereas it felt more Squid Game-esque to me, which also I loved the show Squid Game.
Squid Game was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have any problem with Squid Game, but
Yeah.
Squid Game also doesn't feel like the people in it are playing a video game, literally.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's more like a game show with death. Whereas Dungeon Crawler Carl, it's literally, I mean, there were sequences in it where I was like, I have played this, almost exactly this scene in a game. So I know the author, like he's also got to be very into video games, and he's doing an homage or reference to something he's played, I'm sure. But I'm like, I don't get it. Why? I was totally confused, and I really had it in a way. I mean, to start with, I heard about lit RPG and progression fantasy, and I immediately went, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Why would anyone write that, let alone read it? Da, da, da. I had all these judgments. And then after a while, I recognized in myself that I was judging something I had no idea about.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, screw that. A lot of people have been saying Dungeon Crawler Carl is quite good. I'll try it. I understand what it is, at least now.
Yeah.
And I understand it's not for me, which is fine. I just like, not bad. I can understand. I can understand it having a certain addictive quality, just like video games do.
Yeah.
So
I feel similarly how you feel about lit RPG from Dungeon Crawler Carl to like progression fantasy. Like I've done the whole Cradle series, and I have almost no. I ended up liking the second half, but not really the first half of it. But I have no interest in even digging further into other series or cultivation or like I think it's a side of the fantasy genre where it's I think a lot of people who have been influenced by certain kind of Japanese anime shows and that I was never watching as a kid, and so I think I'm more at home usually in just like the typical epic fantasy, hard fantasy or hard sci-fi, fantasy stuff. Because that the progression fantasy, like Colin's doing Cradle right now, and it is just like a completely different type of storytelling style than
Colin doesn't look very excited.
Yeah.
I'm not. I honestly, because like I mean, I was similarly to you, Matt. I really try not to just write things off, especially as someone that creates anything. Like somebody wrote a book, right, and other people have enjoyed this.
Yeah, it can't be just
simply
objectively horrible. Yeah,
right. So I was like, I'm gonna try Cradle, and the first book was okay. Like I thought it was, I didn't.
Now Cradle,
have that,
Cradle, Cradle. I've only heard indirectly about. It's progression fantasy where people are trying to min-max themselves and level up and all of that, but it's not. In a video game, the way Dungeon Crawler Carl is.
No,
right.
It's just in a secondary world, epic fantasy style thing.
But they're calling out the fact that they have now leveled up, or
there are clear kind of like you're at iron level or jade level, and each level you have kind of a different set of kind of powers and abilities.
Okay.
It's a very deliberate cultural process in Cradle. Like it is very much a part of their culture, and their stature in society is related to where they are. And that part of it feels realistic enough, but I think, and Ben has helped me kind of just assuage some of my just aversion to the second book, because he wrote, Will White allegedly wrote Cradle and didn't think that it was going to go anywhere, the first book. And then people liked it. So he kind of was just like, oh, I have to
continue this now. Yeah.
My fans like this. And so Ben was saying that he didn't even feel the book really got a good footing underneath it till book 6. And a lot of people feel like it does in book 3. Book 2 literally feels like Will White has written a manual for how to play a video game and then gives examples for how you would see this play out in the real world. He'll literally spend paragraphs explaining how this works why this works, what this will result in, and then like the next scene will be those things happening. And I'm just like,
and yet how the
this
magic
is
works is never clear.
really brutal.
Yeah.
No, I don't understand anything that's happening in the second book. I am 6 hours into it. It's only 8 hours. I'm gonna finish it because I'm stubborn. I am really not enjoying the second book.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Anytime anyone like, I always say that the Wheel of Time fans are the ones who have convinced me not to read it, because nobody will tell you how horrible it is like a Wheel of Time fan. Like, they're like, it gets good at book 4. Like, I'm not reading 3 books to wait for it to get good. And then they're like, yeah, but then it's really good for a few books, and then comes the slog, and it's really slow and boring for like 4 books. I'm like, wow, okay, so I've got 3 books to look forward to before it gets good, and then I've got 3 books where it's good, and then I've got 4 books where it's really slow and boring. I've got better things to read. But Kay, you said you tried some lit RPG. What did you try? Did you try Cradle as well, or?
I did. I dropped the series after book 1. There was a development in book 1 that actually enraged me. And it's kind of the equivalent of like you're watching a movie and you get a dream sequence, all these things happened, and you're fully invested and you're like, yeah. And it just, the person wakes up and, oh no, that's not what happened. And everything that you were invested in gets swept away. That enraged me. And then hearing the same thing, it gets better at a certain point, and you have to read so many books. I was like, maybe not for me. In terms of progression fantasy, I started Ascendant by Michael R. Miller.
Oh, is that called progression fantasy as well?
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
It's not so much
I've got
in
it.
terms.
You
Yeah.
sent it to me, and I haven't started it yet, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's not, I wouldn't say so much it doesn't have like the video game aspect. It's very much
Right.
fantasy dragons, and it's more of a strengthening. They get stronger, but it does have very specific set of kind of rules
Levels,
around how that
basically.
works. And
Right.
yeah. That I enjoyed mostly. I actually really enjoyed it for the characters in the world. I think because it was a fantasy, I could just kind of like, oh yeah, those are the rules, and then enjoy the rest, right? And then Dreamer's Throne. I'm going to see if I can grab it. By Seth Ring. This was probably, aside from Ready Player One of my first lit RPGs. It's a bit darker, a bit of a horror element to it, but it has the same thing with like the menus coming up and the stats and everything like that. I didn't mind.
I love. I've never heard of that in my life or seen that. I love that I'm enmeshed in this community and can still just find stuff that comes out of complete nowhere.
Yeah.
My TBR, I remember a time before I had a BookTube channel, which wasn't that long ago, where when I decided I wanted to read another book, like I finished a book and I was ready for the next one, I'd really have to think about it.
Yeah.
I'd be like, let's have a look on Amazon. Has this author written anything I haven't read yet, or that, or and I could go like a week considering what my next book might be. And now I'm like, my TBR is crushing me. I do not have enough years left in my life to read it all.
And the books keep getting pumped out. They keep getting published, 1, 2, 3, 4 a year.
Authors, take a break for 5 years. All of you.
Yeah.
It's just
it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. I do miss those days of not even having a TBR at all. And I stumbled from one thing to the next, especially early on in fantasy. And I was just discovering like just books and series I had no expectations of going in, and then loving when it was so fresh and I had no expectations, like discovering the Magician's Trilogy by Lev Grossman with having never seen anyone talk about it or review or a good, like just stumbling in. Same with Temeraire by Naomi Novik, and falling in love with these things. There's a certain magic to that without knowing anything about them and just kind of stumbling in, and also not feeling the weight while you're reading, the weight of the TBR mountain looming over there. That is there always.
I'm trying this year. This is one of my projects this year, is to redefine what TBR means, at least for me personally. And at the moment, what TBR means is a shelf or a shelf and a half in my living room of books that I own that I haven't read, that I want to read. And that's it. And every time I'm ready for the next book, I try and really be conscious of what I'm in the mood for. And then I go see if I can find that on that shelf. You know, and like, I don't have a concrete plan. I mean, because of some video stuff I've done, I want to keep vlogging Lord of the Rings. I'm rereading Lord of the Rings. I did a vlog of The Fellowship already, and then had a live chat with Philip and AP and Mike. And I want to do that for each book in Lord of the Rings. But I'm not even sure when I'm going to get to the Two Towers. You know, it may be in the next couple of books. It may be next month sometime. I'm not exactly sure, and it doesn't matter. Like, it's not impacting anyone unless they're a massive Lord of the Rings fan and extremely impatient. It doesn't have any influence on anyone else what I read when. Just I'm going to keep talking about things when I read them, because it was driving me a little crazy last year. I was involved in lots of read-alongs and readathons and buddy reads, and I was trying to do a TBR every month and say, next month I'm going to read this, and I never did, or at least not all of it, and it was just driving me a bit nuts. And now I'm like, that's why, like, beginning of this year, I did a TBR-ish video where I just sort of talked about, hey, here's a whole bunch of series I want to read, but I'm not telling you anything about when. Maybe, hopefully, possibly could happen this year. But otherwise, like, we'll see. Yeah, no, it's the whole super planned thing drives me nuts. How are you guys?
It's overwhelming though, like, because I just being in BookTube, even just watching BookTube, or then being part of it, you see all these different reads that people are loving and you want to try, and then I feel like I've been doing nothing but reading modern, pretty recent fantasy and sci-fi for the last like 5 years, and there's still like 100 series and new authors that are like high priority for me, where it's like, how have I not done Ken Liu's Dandelion Dynasty yesterday, or Daniel Abraham's like Long Price Quartet or Dagger in the Coin, or like all the KJ Parker books, or starting Guy Gavra Kana, but like, it's just too many. It's so hard to like try to read what we're in the mood for and then feel like, wow, there's just even ones that are like high priority that I think I will love. I can barely feel like I'm ever fitting those in. And even just trying to read, like, I want to get through some of my favorite author stuff. Like Adrian Tchaikovsky's a favorite author of mine. Like to even catch up to his backlog, I'm like halfway through. And I have,
well, like, he puts out 2 or 3 books every year.
Yeah. So if you have to be reading the new releases, and then on top of that, be reading like double that number to try to catch up within a few years. Yeah. So like, it's brutal. Like, I discovered Bernard Cornwell is one of my favorite authors in the world. Right as I started my channel, I read the Sharp books and the Warlord Chronicles, and just, you know, I'm halfway through his stuff now, but still have like the Saxon Tales and a few other series to try. But it's like, why aren't I just reading Cornwell? But then I have all this other stuff to read, and I'm overwhelmed by just not even being able to get to my favorite authors stuff, and then try new ones on top of that, fit in a reread here and there. Matt, I've been respecting how you've been doing, you know, your Lord of the Rings rereads, your Hob rereads, like fitting those in. And
the rereading, like, I've also been doing it with TV a lot lately. Like, I recently re-binged The Expanse, and beginning of this month I re-binged The Bear. Has everyone watched The Bear?
Nope.
No.
Oh my god, watch The Bear. Oh my god.
Okay.
It's so good.
What is it on?
Here anyway. It could be different in the US. It's on Disney Plus, strangely. It's not at all a Disney thing. I think they just licensed it. I don't know how all of that works, but here it's on Disney Plus.
I think it's a cable show here, like maybe FX or something.
It's probably I think it is FX. I think it has an FX logo at the beginning. anyway, it doesn't necessarily sound super exciting. It's a 5-star chef who has worked at Noma, which is like one of the
It's the
fanciest
Jeremy Allen White show. Is that okay? Okay.
And he comes back to Chicago to take over his dead brother's sandwich shop. And the place is a mess, and he wants to turn it into a real restaurant. And he's working with the people who were already there and have been there for 20 years and have their stupid, not very useful habits and all of this sort of stuff. It's really good.
That is a really promising premise for a lot of like interesting character stuff.
It's super. I mean, it's all character. Like, it's all about the characters, and it's super, super interesting. A lot to say about like leading a team and motivating people and being a human at work, and all of these sorts of things. Really, really good. But we're not here to talk about TV. Rereading to me is, in a way, it's safe. Like, I know if I reread Realm of the Elderlings, I'm going to have like a year and a half of awesome reading.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to worry about it. It's just going to be super
there's no
good.
gamble. Yeah.
No, it's just going to be awesome. And if I reread Lord of the Rings, I know it's going to be good, and I just reread Dune for the 9th time and got things out of it that I didn't the first 8 times. Because the new movie's coming up. I'm wearing my Dune t-shirt.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, like, and they're not, I guess, as far as the like being an awesome popular booktuber thing, they're not necessarily the best things to read. Because I think overall our society in general is very focused on the new shiny all the time. And like, this book just came out, or even better, I got an ARC and I can read it before you can read it. And I can tell you how awesome it is before you can even buy it, that kind of thing. And I don't know. I'm not that interested in that myself. I'm interested in talking about really good books, and I'm super happy to reread Malazan and talk about it, or reread Realm of the Elderlings and talk about it, because they are some of the best fantasy books there are.
Man. I cannot wait to do a reread of these Malazan books. Like that. That's going to be something.
I'm on Reaper's Gale. I kind of stalled on Reaper's Gale because I think at the time I just looked at it and it's like as thick as my head, and I was like, whoa, I'm not sure I can handle that right now. I think I'll read Piranesi instead.
Yeah.
Thick as my finger is nice instead of thick as my entire head. Have you all read Malazan?
Halfway, or partway through.
Okay, where are you at?
So I need to read book 5 next. I can't remember the name of it.
Ooh.
It's hidden on my shelf over there. I stopped after House of Chains.
5 is that Memories of Ice, or is it the Bone?
Midnight Tides.
Midnight Tides. Right.
You're one away from one of my favorite books of all time, The Bone Hunters.
Bone Hunters is okay. Yeah, and Memories Midnight Tides is also awesome. I mean, I have said it before. At the beginning of Midnight Tides, I wanted to punch Steven Erikson in the neck because
New Continent,
not only a new continent, like I got used to that because he does that every book, kind of. But it's a new continent and a completely 100% new cast.
Yeah.
Nobody you've ever heard of is in that book. Sort of later, but at the beginning, nobody you've ever heard of is in that book. And I was just
new cultures, new races, new politics, new everything.
Yeah. But it turned into one of my favorite Malazan books. Have you, Colin, Malazan?
I just finished Memories of Ice. It is one of the videos I've been putting off making my review for that book.
The doozy of a book, so it's no surprise because there's so much in there.
I can't so the last, not calendar year, but the last probably half a year, I have really been, so Matt and I briefly talked about this either virtually or maybe when I stopped by for the Sunday pub.
Yeah.
Fool's Fate was one of the most cathartic personal reading experiences I've ever had. I feel so attached to those characters that I feel no need to like even defend it. Like I just know what that book made me feel.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like people can tell me that Live Ship is their favorite series in Rumble the Outerlings. I don't know. That's awesome. Like that book, Fool's Fate, did more for me in that last back half of that book than I ever thought was possible. And I was literally, speaking of memories of ice, I mean, my wife and my daughter were downstairs, like just like playing, making a bunch of noise. I was sitting in our bed. This is like the middle of the day on a Sunday, like almost sobbing, reading the last 60 to 70 pages of Memories of Ice and just thinking to myself, how is this possible? Like to elicit these emotions from somebody. Like how I can't imagine writing that as Steven Erikson. What that creative energy must feel like as he's like getting those words out and being like, "Oh my gosh, this is like coming together better than I ever could have." Like the end of that book blew me away. I will never like I've never seen a display throughout that entire book like there is of compassion anywhere. Not a TV show, not in real
Yep.
life. I've never experienced what true compassion really is, except for in the ending of that book. It blew me away.
Yep.
And I don't want to just willy-nilly put my camera up and talk about it. Like I want to try to convey somehow how this book made me feel.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how one man can do that.
I kind of took the coward's way out, and I did a review of Gardens, and then I did a review of House of Chains, and I think I did a review of Deadhouse Gates, and then I was like, at this point, there's no point in reviewing it because, like, if you've read 3 books, I don't need to tell you to read the 4th one, you know.
Yep.
And I sort of dropped it, but I want to do more theme videos. I did at some point. I did one called Death and Rebirth in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, just about like throughout the entire series. So it's a very spoilery video because I talk about everybody who dies and some of the people who don't stay dead and that kind of thing. And that was maybe the hardest video I've ever done for me, you know, just getting my thoughts together and like the pressure of, I want to say something intelligent about these books, you know, and about these heavy themes. And I felt a little validated when Erikson commented on the video. I was like, oh, okay.
Ooh,
So
nice.
it must have not completely sucked, at least. But
it's so cool from as someone who's never gonna write. I'm not interested in writing. I don't have that creative impetus, the drive to create from nothing. I'd just like to experience what other people are putting out there. It must be cool from Erikson's perspective to see these books, you know, more than a decade after he wrote them, just for people to still be just like in the weeds, discussing them, picking them apart, and seeing people have profound experiences with them. Like that, it's cool.
Well,
What
and also
giving, what YouTube is giving him as the author.
I always think about that, like how weird it must be, like as an author, especially an author who has written such a deep and complex and meaningful theme-laden series, to have people coming at it and maybe like reading into it things that you never thought of as the author, you know, like coming up with meanings and hidden, you know, stuff where you're like, that's really interesting, but I didn't consciously put that there. You know, it's got to be so strange. So strange. Where did you say you're at, Kay?
I got to start book 5.
You're about to start Midnight Tides. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
I had to put a pause on it because I devoured House of Chains. I
Yep.
actually much preferred it to Memories of Ice. I know Memory of Ice is, you know, a big fan for everyone, but it didn't quite hit me as much as everyone talks about. I much preferred House of Chains, but then I lost my grandmother And I was like, Malazan is not the thing I need to read right now.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Maybe not. So I put a pause on it, and I've been feeling the itch to get back to it. The nice thing with taking a break in between is that it's Malazan. I always went in blind. I knew that by like the end of book 1, I knew that if every book I started was just going to be a slap in the face, like none of the characters, it's all going to be new, or we're going to be thrown into random situations. So the nice thing about coming back to it is I do remember some stuff, but I also don't really need to worry too much about recapping a whole lot of things because of the way he writes those stories.
Yeah. No, it's really unique in the fantasy series world in that every volume is really nicely self-contained. Even book 9,
in a
which
way,
he says is
but
like connected to
look
book
like
10, but yeah.
If you look
there's
like
definitely
at
those
the
arcs,
whole
yeah,
arc,
yeah.
there is stuff that flows throughout the whole thing.
Oh, definitely.
But you can easily, especially like Midnight Tides is probably the easiest one to pick up without worrying about recapping the first 4, because nothing from the first 4 is in it.
Yeah.
You know,
just thinking about like that compared to Realm of the Elderlings, where it feels like each sub-series is really kind of like one big Lord of the Rings book. It's like one story just divided up into the volumes based on like, 400 or 500 pages is a nice size for a single bound paperback. Because those it feels like the Live Ship trilogy is just like one story, one tale, or Tawny Man is truly just like one story in 3 volumes.
Each of the trilogies in the tetralogy, they're all they belong together. Although, I mean, I totally recommend to people not to do this, but you could theoretically just pick up Live Ships and read it, or like you couldn't really pick up Tawny Man and just read it because you're missing a hell of a lot from Farseer. But you could pick up Live Ships or Rangwilds and just read those, and they're because the connections to the rest are so tenuous. They're there, but they're kind of like Easter eggs for people who've really read the series. They're not important to what's going on in that series so much. Where are you, like you guys, you Ben and Colin, you're reading
Blood of Dragons together. The last book in the Rainwild is next for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are you finding it? People are very mixed on Rainwilds.
Yeah, we've been pretty positive overall. I loved books 1 and 2. They tell almost like it's like a sub-series within a sub-series, like a very specific plot that I loved, and I got very attached to all the characters very quickly. So for me, Rainwild's been a big hit. Although I loved books 1 and 2 so much that like the reset with City of Dragons kind of didn't work as well for me, but it's been a little different for Colin.
Yeah, it's been a much more gradual process for me, and I feel like this has been kind of consistent with Ben and I's reread. There hasn't been a book we've straight up disagreed on in our entire read through so far. But 1 and 2, 1 was, I wasn't very attached to the characters. I thought the plot was extremely interesting. The characters I was not emotionally attached to very much compared to Live Ship and Farseer. And then in book 2, I grew more attached to them, and the plot I still found was very, very intriguing. And the 3rd book, I think, because there were some very distinct ties, which again, like you said, are not necessary to understand the plot of the Rainwilds, but they were so cool to realize that we're bringing it back to,
if you know, you know.
I loved book 3 the most so far, and I'm excited for book 4 because I can now see how this is all going to tie into everything that I already know about the series. There's a path there. How she's going to get it there is always a wonder to me. And the thing that I've like really enjoyed about Hobb that I find is just the product of a very talented author. There are oftentimes things that I think should end a certain way or resolutions that should happen. And then so many things happen that I begin to just forget that that's how I thought things should be. And then Tawny Man is a perfect example of this. Like how Tawny Man ends, I could have predicted hoping it to end that way after Farseer. I never, ever thought it was going to get to where it got at the end of Tawny Man, but it got there. And it felt like it should have gotten there that way.
And there were moments
so
where it felt like it was completely impossible for it to ever get there.
Yes.
It's just like, oh my God, everything's broken. Everything's horrible. There's no way to fix this. And still, she pulled it off believably. Yeah.
Is Kay a hob reader?
I'm excited.
Also,
is Kay a hob reader?
I haven't started it yet. Well, so I did read Assassin's Apprentice a while back, probably like 10 years ago now. And I don't think I was at the right place to appreciate it because I was just starting reading at the time, and at least in terms of the larger fantasy works. And I think quite a few details went over my head. So it's one I do want to come back to, but I want to finish Malazan first, so that way that's a bit of a long series done. But I do have the first trilogy on my shelves to read.
I mean, one of the nice things about Realm of the Elderlings is it's really easy to pick up just a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Malazan where it all just continues. It's really easy to just read Farseer and drop it for a while, and
that's what I did. Yeah,
read Live Ship sometime later.
It did make me miss some things that Colin has been picking up, because it was like 4 years since I'd read Farseer.
Right.
So that was just much fresher for him, and I was missing little Easter eggs and details that he was catching. So it would better memory you have for them definitely will help you catch stuff, but certainly not necessary. I liked the Farseer trilogy. I enjoyed it, but none of them reached the point where I was like a gripped, fully emotionally invested reader during them. Like I would say I am for things I get 5 stars to. It's like I was appreciating them. I liked it. But I was worried Hob was just not going to be like one of my favorite authors until Live Ship just blew me away. Just a whole nother level of investment and engagement into the story. It was so immersive, got so connected to the cast, and the plotting was so masterful in the way the various books ended and converged, and just one of the just masterpiece kind of series I've ever read.
I was kind of pissed off at
You're saying that
Erickson.
Live Ship put wind behind your sails.
If anyone isn't subscribed to Colin's channel, he is the king of dad jokes, by the way. So you can expect this and much more on Colin's Corner. Yeah. Also interesting talk about books, but it's really all about the dad jokes. Yeah, no, I was kind of pissed off at Erickson and Hobb, because when I have one of those weird reading histories with Realm of the Elderlings. I started it a long time ago, meaning there was only the Farseer trilogy at the time, and originally that was all she was going to write as well, which is inconceivable to me. But like originally it was just going to be a trilogy, and I read those, I loved them, and I was like, wow, okay, cool. But to read more of her stuff, I had to look her up under her other name, Megan Lindholm, and I read the Soldier Son trilogy and loved it less, but also thought it was pretty good, and forgot about it for years. And then I just moved to Sydney. I'd been living in Germany. I moved to Sydney. I found the local coolest, biggest, nicest fantasy sci-fi bookshop, which was it's called Galaxy, and it's really good. I found it. I went in there. I was looking for some books, and I looked up, and there was a little notice on the wall that said Robin Hobb live in store. And I was like, oh, I remember the Robin Hobb. Like I read the Farseer trilogy a while ago. And then I read on this little flyer, and it was yesterday. Robin Hobb was in the shop I was 24 hours earlier.
Oh no.
But it reminded me. So then I went to their Robin Hobb shelf, and I was like, oh, there's more. And I picked up Live Ship. And because I wanted to read that, I went back and reread Farseer. So I'd read Farseer twice, Live Ships once, and that was all there was. And then again, many years later, I remembered it, and I came back to it, and I read Live Ship again, so 3 times. No, Farseer again 3 times, Live Ship again twice, and then 20 Man. And so it went. So I am now reading the whole series again, and I just finished 20 Man last month, which was amazing. And I haven't read the final trilogy.
Oh wow! Oh, you haven't?
No,
Oh, wow.
I've never read it because last time I reread the whole thing, there was only Rain Wilds, you know.
Oh wow!
Yeah, the Fits
You've
and
been
Full
with the
trilogy didn't
series for
exist.
so long. Yeah, I imagine there's just a lot of
Exactly. It's
things
really
tied up
weird.
with it. Yeah.
It's really weird. But I'm so looking forward to the final trilogy. I got pissed off at Erickson and Hobb because when I started rereading Hobb, and when I read Malazan in 2020, I was like, I don't think I can say that Tolkien is number one for me anymore. Damn.
Competition.
Yeah, I mean, Tolkien had been my number one for like 45, 50 years. And then I was like, I don't know if these other guys are just so good or I've just changed or what it is. But man, yeah. So last time I did a top 10, it was like Erickson or Malazan. Tolkien still beat out Robin Hobb a little bit, but I'm rereading Hobb and Tolkien right now, so we'll see how that comes out when I finish those. But I kind of suspect that Hobb's going to nudge him down another notch. Sorry, Professor.
That's how it goes with reading now.
Yeah.
Our tastes
Right?
change, they evolve, and I find it more. I connect to more recently written things typically. I just feel like the psychology of that's within the writing and the very close psychological distance to characters that's really typical of the recent within the last 30 years kind of writing just is easier to just engage with for me than the more distanced stuff further away, and those also the further away we get in time from certain authors or books, the more that we are kind of culturally different from them and linguistically different, and there's all these different things that are kind of growing the distance between us.
Well, and like social standards, right? That was kind of the hurdle I ran into with classics, specifically Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I did a buddy read on that one, and I know people. There's so many adaptations on it. Quite a few people we were talking to really enjoyed it, and I was just like, I would have loved this story if it was actually from the main character's perspective and getting that psychological view of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but rather the story is told through outside perspectives and the thrilling aspect, and it's sold as like exploration of morality and good versus evil, but really it's just a thriller because for that time frame and how society was, to behave anything outside of improper was scandalous. And so Mr. Hyde doesn't do anything necessarily crazy out there. It's just very poorly behaved for societal standards at the time, right?
Which was a big deal.
Exactly.
At the
Back
time,
then, I
Yeah.
could see why it was such a hit, but today it's just one of those books that doesn't really hold up based on how our society is, at least from my perspective, on holding up to the same praise that it got back then.
Yeah. Lovecraft is similar. Similar and quite different. I mean, he was a foaming at the mouth racist in his life.
Jeez.
In like really like full on, no doubt, no question, hated black people basically. His books, though, his stories are mostly amazing. Especially like since it was kind of the first time that anyone had really come up with the idea of cosmic horror, and they are really interesting. And every now and then, just through a crack in the story, the racism leaks in, and there's just bits where you're like, God, man, nobody would publish your bullshit nowadays. And it's just hints and stuff. I mean, like if you read anything about his life, it's a very different story. He kind of kept it out of his stories, mostly, but every now and then it comes in. And at the time, for his readership, probably a lot of them agreed with him.
Yeah.
And just read over it, like it was no big deal. And nowadays it just sticks out like a siren, It's just like, whoa, okay, dude,
Yeah.
where are you taking this?
As long as you have historical awareness, for where we are now, and then reading something from a certain time period or place, as long as you have some of that awareness, I think it's also cool just to be transported in the time capsule to the previous time of like, oh, look what the cultural norms were, look what what the language was like back then. That almost just has some intrinsic interest for me of just like spending time in the past is really cool that books have allowed us to do, that have survived for many decades or hundreds of years.
How do you all feel? There's a, I mean, it's a big discussion, and there has been a lot of discussion about it. And I always find it kind of interesting how people feel about the work versus the author. Like, how much do you care about the author and who the author is, what they believe, what kind of person they are, or how good or not so good they are, or whatever? And do you separate that from their work? Like, I can enjoy this, even though Lovecraft was a crazy racist.
It's a really interesting question. I have not answered that for myself, but I have some thoughts on it that I think have been trying to form. But I feel like communication between an author to the reader is so intimate and personal. Like, even if it's through the filters of narrators and characters, like it is one person, I'm spending time with their thoughts that they put down on paper, that they formed. And I feel like usually, messages come through books, whether intentional or unintentional. And because it's that intimate communication, I do care like who the authors are. Like, I want authors to be people that I would respect or want to learn from or become wiser by imbibing like their worldview and perspective. And even when books are dealing with really uncomfortable things, like J.M. Coetzee's Disgrace is one of my favorite books of all time. It feels like, this character is doing obviously despicable things, but you feel like as the reader, you're coming to a deeper understanding of humanity, and you do have empathy for everyone there. And it's like feeling like, oh, even if the author's not perfect himself, like that, he's trying to be like a decent person and convey like a valuable message. For me, I prefer, and I think it is important for that author to be, someone who I could respect, because I feel like I'm getting influenced by them no matter what, in some way or another. Like, they're influencing me, and like I'm uncomfortable if I'm feeling like if there are clear reasons why I might not respect that person or not want to be influenced by them, that like even if I would enjoy their story, it makes me uncomfortable still. So those are just my like initial thoughts.
Okay.
I mean, I have kind of the opposite view, and I think it's heavily influenced by my experience as a musician. So I play violin, I play classical music primarily. And I guess my perspective kind of leaks over from there, because if you look at Mozart and you look at the kind of person he actually was, he was quite perverted, depraved. His humor was, pretty childish, and he was not always a nice person, but his music moves people. His music is beautiful. It affected countless people throughout the years and still does today. And yet you have these beautiful operas that he's composed, and yet he wrote a joke. Well, I don't even know if it was a joke, but he wrote a song for his buddies that is, if you don't know it, and I don't know if I can say poor words, it's not that bad, but it's called...
I swear on my
Okay.
channel all the time, so go for it.
So it is a beautiful choir song called Lick Mein Arse. And he wrote that. It's disgusting. Go look if you want to. But he was that kind of person.
Mm.
You know, he was often referred to as a poor behaved, uh, degenerate in some cases, and yet his music was beautiful. So for me, I've learned to kind of separate the creator from the art in a way. Yes, I think that in terms of writing, an author's perspectives and those type of things can come through in the writing, but I personally judge it off the writing. If the writing and the story and what I'm feeling is I'm being influenced by is not working for me, then I'll put the book down. But generally, I go in knowing as little as I can about the author and as many cases as I can, because I to me, it's the art that matters, not necessarily the creator's personal perspectives, if that makes sense. Like, I wanna find out for
Yeah.
myself, does it work for me? Does it move me? Does it, if it doesn't, well, then there's an unhaul bin down the hall, you know? If it
Yeah.
does, great, it goes up on the pretty shelf.
This is
What do you think, Colin?
there's so many facets to this question that it would probably be considered a loaded question. And I think it would be disingenuous to just pick an extreme. Like, I disagree with this author's morals, therefore I don't read their works, or that doesn't bother me. I can separate the art from the artist. I don't feel like that's a genuine answer. Because I feel like many of these things need to be taken like in whatever context, whatever part of society. Like, for instance, this kind of leads into another thing where I've been trying to do less of this over the last few years, which is speaking in absolutes. Because I often find I feel like a fool or may later be found as a fool by speaking in absolutes. When things weren't as technologically as connected as they were, people were touting many of these people as amazing people, artists or creatives of the past. We don't know how they actually were. I mean, maybe more people were like Mozart or other people and like had this hidden, who knows? But for me, the work that they created is a separate entity from them as a person. And I think that sometimes consuming art, consuming media created by a person that does not align with my morals is often a way for me to grow or to think, if this is the way that this person thinks, I don't think I agree with that. But now I am aware that there are people in the world that do think like this and truly believe these things that
Yeah.
differ so far from my morals and beliefs. And they can do that in their own lane. Doesn't have to be my lane. But I have been able to read things and separate the two entities. Like, know that Lovecraft was a racist person, but still be able to read a Lovecraft story. And if it doesn't have those small cracks, which some of them do, like you say, but if it doesn't have those small
Most of them
cracks, and
don't.
it's
Most of them, it
right.
doesn't really come up. It's
Sometimes you can see that stuff peek through if the author is being heavy-handed with their theme work or their, what they're trying to get across. And that irks me because it tells me that you're trying to tell me how you think or tell me how I should think instead of just writing an awful scene and letting me as the consumer decide how I feel about that scene. If that makes sense.
That's actually maybe one of my very favorite elements of Malazan is Erickson writes some really heavy shit and some really horrible things are done to people, and just the world itself can be extremely horrible, and there's just a lot of themes going on that have a lot to do with morality and have a lot to do with horrible things happening to not necessarily so horrible people. And at no point did I feel like Erickson was telling me what to think. He was setting a scene and putting a bunch of things in motion, and a bunch of things happen, and that's it. And I mean, it's clear to me he's bringing up certain things, so they are issues for him. There is something personal about it. Otherwise, why would he select to put those things in the book? But it was never 100% clear to me, oh, he thinks this, or he thinks I should think that, or whatever. It was like, here's a thing which is going to provoke you to think about your morality. So do that, you know? And that was it. And I love that, but I've had a number of authors come out as maybe somewhat reprehensible people after I fell in love with their work, you know? And that always made me think and go back to the work and think, like, did I miss something in there? And yeah, like usually I'm a separate the art from the artist. You know, I love James Brown, even though he was a crack smoking wife beater. Made amazing music, was a horrible person apparently, but made amazing music. His music doesn't change and get worse because we discover things about him, you know. There's always, I guess, the question of like, do you want to support it? James Brown, it doesn't matter anymore. Like, might be supporting his children or who knows what, but not him. But yeah, overall.
But no, I think by your feeling of discomfort, like I would share that too, because even more specifically with reading fiction, I think than anything, like when I was studying World War II in college, and if you have to read some of like Mein Kampf by Hitler, it's like you go into it with your guard up and like knowing the historical circumstances of this, and you know, I'm not worried that I'm going to be kind of influenced kind of without my really knowing it. Whereas with fiction, my guard is down. I'm trying to like almost dissociate myself from like my normal identity, my life. I'm trying to sink into these like narrators' point of views and just live this life. And I feel like I'm with my guard down. I'm much more vulnerable and open to just, you know, the author's influence, even more so than with like music or visual art. Like I feel like I'm much more able to separate the artist, as Kay was talking about, with music or visual art than with fiction specifically. But I like knowing a little bit about my authors and, you know, watching YouTube interviews with them or seeing interviews, and I like getting to know them a little bit, getting the vibe of who they are, and I do feel just more comfortable feeling like, oh wow, this person has a really like generous spirit or really thoughtful and contemplative, and just feeling like you know, oh, I could learn things from them like on a very kind of basic human level and grow and become a better person from them. I like having that feeling. Although a lot of authors I read, I know nothing about them before, and that I try to learn, and then it could be like, ooh, interesting, or like, oh, I really love this. I just want to watch them even more. And I've had that with a lot of authors recently, with
it's
like
totally,
Adrian Tchaikovsky, Cornwell.
It's totally changed. Like I'm a bit older. And when I was reading, like when I started reading fantasy seriously, I was in my teens and 20s, and that was the late 70s and early 80s, and you know, around that time. And back then you had no idea, unless you were lucky enough to live somewhere near a convention where an author you loved maybe was coming to give a talk, or they happened to get interviewed on TV, which nobody in science fiction and fantasy ever did. You had no idea even maybe what the author looked like, you know, let alone what they thought, like beyond what they wrote, you know. And now, today, I've had live streams with authors whose books I like, you know, we all have. And that's, or you can just sit down and watch endless hours of interviews that other people have done on their booktube channels with authors, and you get a feeling for who the person is, you know. And it's a totally different relationship. Like I'm good friends with Tori, and she recently brought out not her first book, but her first book in her new trilogy. And that's a weird experience. It's a weird experience. First of all, I probably expected it to be worse than it was, because I was like, any author who's a friend of mine can't really be a serious author. I mean, like, I don't know serious authors. Like, I don't know any serious authors. They can't. That's not possible. And it was really good. Like, professional level fantasy book. Boom. It was really, really good. And I talk to her all the time about it, and about the new book that she's writing. And I know you're close to her, Kay, and probably also talk to her about it all the time. You know, it's a totally different relationship. Or also in the comments, Vaughn. Yeah, Vaughn has been also very open and friendly and gregarious with booktubers and is just a really, really nice guy. And that relationship is a totally different kind of thing than, I don't know, the first time I read Realm of the Otherlings, I read Farseer trilogy, I didn't even know if Robin Hobb was a woman or not.
Yep.
Which is why she chose the name Robin Hobb, you know?
Yeah.
I wasn't even sure. Like, I didn't know anything about her. I just liked her books, you know? And it was very simple. And now we get all the information, you know, and an author who wrote my favorite science fiction series of all time, at some point in the last, I don't know, 10 years, apparently was publicly an asshole in numerous ways. I haven't actually seen or heard whatever comments he made, but
what author?
Dan Simmons, Hyperion. And apparently he's turned into a bit of a right-wing nutjob.
Well, I got a little bit of that through Rafe Bluetack's review of one of his more recent books.
Yeah,
was like,
but
apparently
for me,
it was just blatantly political.
Yeah. And I'm not interested in reading anything he wrote except Hyperion, because most of what he's written is horror, which is not so much my thing. But yeah, apparently he's become a bit of a nut, which just kind of makes me sad. But I am going to reread Hyperion soon, you know, because
even not on an even to a less extreme extent, like recently, just with the stuff that authors put out there on social media, it can turn me off from an author like Daniel T. Jackson, the author of Illborn Self-Pub. He had a really ungraceful response to someone's very legitimate kind of review that was a little bit critical of the book, but still gave it a really interesting long analysis and was well written. And like Jackson's response to that review publicly was just so ungraceful and defensive and unopen to anyone's like opinions on his book, and it was just such a turnoff for me. And it wasn't like he did anything terrible or anything, but just it just made me feel like, oh, now I had his book here, but like I just am not too interested now in checking it out. Like I don't really respect, you know, some of his way of going about living in the world as an author.
It's a job interview these days. Like I recently had an author contact me, like probably happens to all booktubers. Somebody wrote me and asked if I'd like a copy of their book. And first of all, the way they asked made me think, maybe chill out a little bit. You know, like, I don't know you. I don't know your book. I have a lot of stuff to read. And I kind of, my policy now is if someone just, I've never heard of their book contacts me, I say no, because I don't have the space in my flat for free books that I don't want to read, you know? So I just say, you know, thanks, great, nice, but no. And they kind of kept up, kind of pushed me to take it. And then I did a little research, and I was like, oh, you're a paranoid right-wing nut job. I definitely don't want your book. I don't want to get in a conversation with you about your politics either, but you've just made me aware of you. I've never heard of you before. You've made me aware of you. You've made me check you out like they would at a job interview, and I know I don't want anything to do with you. Cool. Thanks for that, I guess. One less author I have to even think about reading. But
so in one way, having this greater access to authors and knowledge about them, or just exposure, is helpful to help us maybe filter it a bit. But it is interesting just compare it back to like 30 years ago when we would have known basically what was on the author blurb in the back cover, and if they had a photo
which was often almost nothing, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, Andrew's right. Like when I hadn't said the author's name, he said it's either Orson Scott Card or Simmons. He's right about both. I read a lot of Orson Scott Card a long time ago. I knew that he was a Mormon. I didn't know that much about Mormonism. I wasn't at all interested in Mormonism. I've already got a religion, thanks. But he's also in recent years become quite a crazy boy, and gotten really odd. and it makes me feel kind of weird about all of the stuff I read of his a long
same
time
with Harry
ago.
Potter. Like growing up, just where Harry Potter is such a warm, cozy thing I could return to as a kid. It was just throughout my childhood, I had it with me. And then the author, is publicly doing things I disagree with that make me feel uncomfortable. Like I haven't actually gone back and done a reread, since I become aware of that stuff, and not sure if I'm too interested in it. Like I do have trouble separating the art and the artist. Like Kay was saying, she can do it with Mozart. Like I don't really think I can, honestly.
A slightly different subject, but I also find it interesting, is what Vaughn said. It's not exactly what we were talking about, but like I imagine it must be really strange as an author writing difficult characters.
Yeah.
Like
because some readers are basically going to think that that's the author's.
I think it's just you. It's just you saying this is all right, this is good, this is the way the world should be, or something. And it's, I mean, the best books. One of the things I absolutely hate in a book, like fiction, is when I hit a bit in the book where I feel like the author is talking to me. Like I don't want the author in his book.
Yeah. I had that experience actually within the last year with Monster Hunter International, because I knew the author, Larry Correia, was like a huge, in real life, advocate for just freedom of gun rights ownership, and like to the point of it being like a gun nut kind of person in real life. And then I felt like we were getting some almost like speeches toward that end in the book that kind of were out of place and felt like it was the author just speaking, and that really put me off. Yeah, like it wasn't organic to the characters. Yeah, I'm right with you, Matt.
Yeah, and I don't want. I mean, I don't think I ever confuse like characters doing horrible things with the author then being a horrible person, but I think a lot of people do. It seems to be pretty common. I've seen comments towards Erickson. Like there are, especially in the last few books of the series, there are some pretty heavy things that happen. And like thinking, it just seems totally bizarre to me to think that a nice Canadian man is condoning doing these horrible things to people. Like, I mean, he's Canadian.
We're the nicest folks.
Yeah. Canadians don't do anything horrible to anyone.
It's always amazing seeing what authors can imagine, what they can create and imagine on the darkness and it's astounding sometimes.
I guess I kind of will take the liberty here to maybe expand this a little bit into like a larger potential issue. And I feel like the people, it's very stuff like this, viewpoints like this, takeaways from books like this remind me how truly important it is to be well read, to be educated in some way, because like if you understand what fiction is and the reasons one might read fiction books, then it's pretty obvious that what the author is writing is not who the author is. It's just fiction. Like, and we give liberties to other people in society like this. I mean, I don't know. I use basketball as a lot because I love it, but there are people on the basketball that are killers, like want to kill every opponent, will get technical fouls, will act absurd. And you hear them in a press conference afterwards, and they are the nicest people. They are involved fathers. They are dedicated husbands. They give back to the community. It's such a stark difference from who they are on the court, but that is their expression of creativity. That is who they are when they are in the flow of their. So like an author writing a character that's just not even close to who they are, but is like reprehensible. That's just, I feel like them expressing a creative. They might not have even known that character was going to go there, but they're just kind of in the flow of writing, and this is what came out. This person's horrible. Oh well, like I never think ever this is who this person that wrote this book is.
I mean, I think for me, and kind of to add to that, is it's important for people to discover what kind of readers they are, right? Everyone has different boundaries. They have different books and authors that they go to. And you have to, like you said, you have to be a little bit well read. You have to start reading and figure that out for yourself. Explore different opinions, different viewpoints, and take what works and leave what doesn't for you. Uh, that applies to genres, tropes, all of it. I think it's at the end of the day, for me, it's try it and see how it works and learn about yourself throughout the process.
I had an interesting reverse experience. Maybe some of you did relatively recently as well. When I read The Way of Dan, because we all know Dr. Fantasy, yeah, and I mean he may as well be Canadian. He's so nice. I always call him the nicest man on BookTube. He's just so polite and so friendly, and so it's just a joy to talk to. And then I start his book, and in the first few pages, I'm like, okay, like you do when you start a new fantasy epic, you're like, oh, okay, this guy, the guy I'm reading about, he's the character, and he gets brutally murdered. And I'm not spoiling anything because it happens in the first chapter. And I was like, Philip Chase is a bloodthirsty bastard. Oh my God. Who knew? And it's like the other way around. Yeah. Instead of reading a book and then realizing that the author is, there you go. He's mean. He's so mean.
That's the cool thing about fiction is people can imagine completely different lives and actions and things that are separate from themselves and play out all these dramas that would never happen in our own lives. And that's the magic of fiction. So I love it when authors just are creative and get so outside of themselves. And I'm really looking forward to reading that one. I'm waiting actually until Alan does the audiobook. So I'll be getting the book through two different actual humans that I am familiar with, which is weird to think about.
I'm going to get the audiobook as a reread because when he announced that Alan was doing the audiobook, I was like, oh my God, that's genius. That's going to be so good. Alan doing voices. I mean, we know he can do voices. So that should be fun. How is it, Colin? I've only read the first one so far.
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it a lot. I think, like you said, it was a bit. I've talked about this before too. It was a bit of a reverse. The first scenario where I felt like I knew Philip, at least Internet Philip, before his books came out, and following him over the last 4 years or so since he started his channel has been the same experience for me. Like, this guy is so nice, so informed about the fantasy genre as a whole. I really wonder how he's going to pull this off, what his writing is going to feel like. And I was like, whoa, didn't know you had that in you, Philip.
But at first it surprised me because the whole time I was thinking Tolkien, he's a huge Tolkien fan, and he and I have talked about Tolkien without end, and Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, and I'm just constantly thinking about that. But I realized when I started reading his book, he's also a huge Erikson fan, and Erikson is brutal. Nothing brutal happens in Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. All of the killing is pretty clean, and you don't really see it, and it's kind of a PG book. But Erikson zooms in on it sometimes. And you get the brutal. It's messy and ugly and painful a lot of the time. And I think Philip is kind of balancing maybe those two influences a lot in a way.
And we are. It speaks to how we are the sum total of our experiences and memories, and that includes our experiences of fictional worlds. That could be just as real and visceral for us as things we've gone through, kind of in our day-to-day lives. And that's why I love reading fiction so much, just to lived so many different lives and places and experiences and heroic moments and sad and tragic moments and experience all those emotions, because my day-to-day life is pretty mundane and boring and routine, which I'm lucky for. But man, to be able to escape every day into more exciting, dramatic situations, it's so special. I just couldn't imagine not doing it at this point.
I'm curious, slightly different thing. I just looked at my shelf and something you said reminded me. I've been aiming to this year read a little broader. So outside science fiction and fantasy. Well, first of all, outside fantasy. So read maybe more science fiction, but then also outside of that, like more contemporary fiction, literary fiction, that kind of stuff. Do you three read much outside of genre fiction?
That's what I was basically only reading like for years before 2018 and my giant fantasy science fiction binge began. But I was reading a lot of literary fiction, some classics, some nonfiction, literary nonfiction stuff, like the Norwegian kind of autobiographical fiction series, My Struggle by Karl Ove Knausgaard. That was like consuming my life for a while. That was awesome. And you're just like very much just enmeshed in our recent real life reality, day-to-day life reality. And yeah, in the right mood, that sort of thing can feel really profound. Like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, another one that's just incredible.
I've read that a few times. That's an amazing book.
Oh yeah. But it's so, they're so like, those types of reads, they make you confront reality and like real life. And what I crave now is like escaping real life, because it's so depressing to me, our reality. And so like I crave more of the escapism. And you often have very, human, real things that you can reflect on through the fictional worlds. But yeah, if you're in the right mood, those real world settings can be really profound. But I'm curious to hear if Kay or Colin have been reading stuff like that.
Okay.
Well, last year it was fantasy and science fiction kind of took over. I did read more classics and historical fiction, and I'm trying to get back into that a little bit. I used to try and fit one of a different kind of genre in each month if I could, and then chaos. Life is just insane. So, yeah, historical fiction. I've been enjoying Patricia Meredith's book. She's written the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries, which is 1800 Spokane murder mysteries kind of thing. And I try and dip my toes in where the mood strikes, and as I can. I find with classics, it's usually hit or miss, kind of like the Doctor Strange and or Jekyll and Hyde. Sorry, that one was a miss, but I really enjoyed Wuthering Heights by, I think it's Emily Bronte or Charlotte Bronte. And it's a risk. It's more of a risk than fantasy. Fantasy and sci-fi is kind of my, if I'm going in, I know at least I'm going to have a decent or a good time, as opposed to classic and historical fiction. It's more of a gamble on whether or not I'm absolutely going to love it, or the complete opposite. It just does not work for me at all. But yeah, I want to get back to fitting in more, because there are some chunkers that I want to get to too.
Yeah, that was an intentional goal of mine with this upcoming year, to explore some other genres, but use fantasy and science fiction as a rendezvous point, because I know I do enjoy these. They feel like home to me, but the idea of writing interests me. I've been buying some books on writing. I'm reading Stephen King's book right now. I just purchased another book called Bird by Bird, I think, by a lady named Anne Lamott. It says instructions on writing and life. I'm reading a book on meditation right now to try some new tactics in my life.
Which one?
And it's
called... I'm a Buddhist who's been meditating for 30 years, so really? I'm curious about meditation.
Nice.
Called May I Sit With You
by
Tom Catton.
Okay, don't know it, but there's a lot of books on meditation.
He's in a 12-step recovery group, so a lot of it kind of ties into that, but isn't about
Right.
recovery. It's about how he incorporates meditation into his recovery. So it's interesting.
Okay.
And I do plan on reading Crime and Punishment, and I want to explore more horror. So I do want to challenge myself by just kind of stepping out of my comfort zone this year. And just, I think the books on writing are fun to read because the concept of writing has always really interested me. And I feel like as a reader, it's helped me just to read a little bit about how different authors approach the craft of writing to appreciate more of what I read. Because somebody has deliberately, The War of Art,
The
okay,
War
by
of
Stephen
Art
Great.
Pressfield.
instead of the Art of
Great,
War.
great title. Great
title, and it's a great book.
Yeah.
I've read it. I've read it as well, and it's very good. I don't do any writing, but I've read On Writing by King and also The War of Art. Both really, really interesting.
Yeah, I just think it's fun. Like it's a concept that interests me outside of reading. Like I think the whole process of writing something is cool and fun. Maybe that makes me a nerd. I don't really know, but I like to see how other people approach
Maybe it makes you an
and,
author.
yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe. But I think that it's helped me become a better reader for sure. Because I'm really like trying to appreciate more what maybe authors are just trying to accomplish. And having tried my hand just at writing for fun, it blows me away that anyone is able to complete an entire novel. Like,
Yeah.
That's a
I'm just
real
imagining-
project.
Yep.
I try to imagine Steven Erikson. Like I looked at when I was getting into the Malazan series, I was looking at the publication dates, and I'm like, wait, like 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004. I'm like, what, like mad dash was he doing to get these books done one a year? Like I'm just imagining him sitting in like living in some like Canada cafe where he's just like madly typing away for like 10 years to get this thing done. And like they're so polished, like he probably didn't have time for that many like editing passes. Like he didn't do it as a young writer. Like he'd gone through a phase of being like a literary fiction author or short story author and gone through writing programs. So he was a veteran by the time it was just this calling came. And then to pound out those 10 books in like 10 years, I don't understand it. I can't fathom it.
He's obviously a writing as work kind of writer. Like he sits down and writes every day. And it's also one of the things that King says in his book on writing is just write every day, and write a certain amount every day. No matter whether you feel like it or not, no matter whether you have a clear idea or not, just write. And yeah, it's amazing to me, especially considering like some of those books in Malazan are like 1,100 pages, and he put out one a year. It's pretty crazy. Yeah,
and I think he's working on his own book on writing right now. At least he's mentioned it in a few.
He mentioned it
in a
yeah.
few YouTube videos.
Yeah. I guess he's allowed to take time out for that and write one book that isn't Malazan, but he really should get to the Malazan books and make sure that they get done. That's all I have to say. There's only 27 of them. Like if you count his and Ian C. Esselmont's, I think there's 27 all up. And yeah, there should be more.
Did you read God Is Not Willing?
No, see, in a way, it's probably a stupid plan, but I thought it was a good plan at the time when I started my channel that I would start my channel by rereading Malazan.
Yeah,
and the plan is to read them in world chronological order, right?
Yeah.
I started, but the prequel trilogy wasn't finished when I started this. So I didn't go back and read those first because I couldn't. So I just started Malazan Book of the Fallen. And I think after House of Chains, or I forget exactly when it was, I read Night of Knives. by
Mhm.
Esselmont, which is kind of a prequel. Actually, maybe I read that
Yeah,
before. And then some of the Corbel Broach, Bocalan and Corbel Broach novellas come in between the books, kind of, although it doesn't really matter because they don't have any chronological connection to the story. At some point, like God Is Not Willing is after
Yeah.
the 10 books, so I will get to it when I finish the series again.
Yeah.
And I think there's also some of Esselmont's books, like Crimson
Are
Guard
after, yeah.
and Stone Sword Scepter or Orb Scepter. I think they come in between some of the later Book of the Fallen books. So yeah, I'm gonna try and read it in kind of chronological
the
world
full set, nice.
order.
Yeah, no rush. I'm gonna have to go back and reread this before book 2 comes out, because this very much feels like a book 1, not as even standalone-ish as the first 10 Book of the Fallen books, but
Right.
really interesting and really deep, and just I think he's still at the top of his game at this point still. But
Yeah.
amazing cover too. Love that cover.
Yeah, I was very disappointed with the cover of what's it called, Forge of the High Mage, the latest Malazan book that came out, and it's AI art. I was like, what are you doing? Oh my god, so disappointing.
That's a no.
And not even, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a designer, and I think about these visual things maybe more than most people, but it's like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, that is AI. It's not even good AI. That is poorly executed AI. It looks like someone spent 5 minutes on Midjourney. It's just so disappointing. And also, like the gold foil on his robe and everything, it just looks really slapdash, the whole thing. It's dodgy as hell.
It's one of the weirder images, because it's like you can't tell if the person's facing toward you or away from you, but I don't feel like it's supposed to be ambiguous. Like, just the way the robe is falling, like, it doesn't seem natural. And then these items down here, I think, were shown to be repeats from other images. Yeah, not great.
Yeah, the whole thing's dodgy. Actually, it's one of the things that is constantly baffling to me. The Book of the Fallen has, like, the normal really dark covers are so bad.
Yeah.
They are garbage covers. They're dark and indistinct, and some of them even, like, I love the Gardens of the Moon. I can see it behind you, Kay. That circle picture. Yeah. That picture represents nothing in the book. Nothing at all. There is no. I had a long conversation on Malazan Reddit years ago about
Looks
this.
Cool, though.
Kind of, but it makes me think it's a vampire novel or something. You know?
Yeah,
that's fair.
That one also.
This cover is so
in the book.
So generic, and it just looks like some digital fire.
Yeah.
Thrown onto a generic warrior.
Yeah.
It's like
the whole series. I'm like, such a good series.
Yeah,
and
look at the difference.
Bad covers.
Look at the difference in cover. Like, this cover is a specific character and scene, and it's amazing. Like, I love the colors. Why did they have to make it so dark and just nothing?
And the dude, like, is there anybody who runs around with an axe and a shield in the entire novel? No, there isn't.
No.
It could be any warrior from any fantasy or historical novel.
Look at Gruntle there. That's great stuff.
I forget the artist's name, but I unfortunately don't like his work at all, just his visual style. But that's
one?
Yeah, that's just a personal taste thing. But it is clearly a character from the book, at least.
Todd Lockwood.
Yeah. Lockwood. I mean, he's definitely a professional artist. Like, I'm not saying he's doing bad work, but it just I talked about this recently, not that recently, on Twitter. Like, a lot of people, when they're looking at visual art or design or whatever, the only thing that comes up, and this is the same thing with books, the only thing that comes up is I like it, I don't like it. You know, a completely subjective judgment. And I'm not really qualified to make non-subjective judgments about books. You know, I try, and I don't even really like to call my reviews. I just, more like a reaction. You know, I liked it because people like AP Canavan. AP can sit down and tell you that a book is objectively poorly written, and he can tell you exactly why. And I don't even try and do that. But I'm a designer, and I studied painting, and I worked as a photographer for years. When I look at a cover, I like 1 second, I can tell you it's bad.
I'm so curious. What do you think of the whole Dresden design motif? They're also similar. I'm curious what you make of it.
I mean, they're similar, which can be a good thing because you've got a long series and they have almost like a branding identity.
Yeah.
Like they have a visual identity where it ties them all together. I find the typography it almost makes me think, I don't know, military fiction or something. It has some sort of a
Tom Clancy
chunky,
like
something like that, which I don't think suits the books that well.
Oh, interesting.
And the paintings are well done, but I couldn't tell you what any cover of Dresden looks like, except there's a guy with a cowboy hat and a staff. And that's every cover.
Yeah.
And some of them he's standing in profile like that. And some of them he's looking at the camera, so to speak. And some of them he's on the left side and some of them he's on the right. But like, they all look the same to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's exactly the same cover. Just he's turned to look at the camera and the lighting color has changed.
See, I love this. I have no background in visual design. Like, I wouldn't even just be like have those thoughts. So I'm just enjoying hearing you analyze even this little bit. Like, that's so fascinating to me. Like, I love it. But I've never been enamored with the cover design for this series. But
it looks to me like the art director said the main thing that's important is that they look like they belong together, not that they're interesting.
Can I have fun with this game a little bit more?
1 second, Ben. Can I? I want to take a second to gracefully bow out because I do need to go and get ready for work pretty soon. I don't want to be a party pooper.
I was actually going to remind you half an hour ago when you said you needed to go, but I didn't get a moment.
I strung it out a little bit, but I mean, I want to stay, but I've got to go get ready for work. And
yeah, no worries. Thanks for joining us, Colin.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I had a blast getting to talk to you guys, and Kay, it was nice to officially get to chat with you.
Absolutely.
In person.
Likewise.
Have a great rest of your discussion, guys. I will tune in if you guys are still going to keep going for a little while. But thank you again, Matt. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for coming.
See you, Colin.
See you, Colin.
All right.
I'm probably also going to have to bow out just because I have to get dinner going.
Yeah, no worries. It's
got to feed the kids.
10 p.m. here, so it's a good time for me to get offline as well.
I want to maybe just be able to chat with you about cover design. Maybe I can have you on my channel and I can just present lots of different covers to you, see what you think.
Absolutely. I've been thinking actually about going through, I mean, I always want to keep my channel fundamentally positive. So I'm not really interested in like ripping anyone's bad covers, but I would like to maybe grab like 10 books and just go through in design eye. Why are these good? Why do I like them? Why do I think they're well executed? Why do they think they work well? But yeah, people keep saying, because I always do when I do a review, I always do a cover bit at the end.
I love that part. Yeah.
A lot of people have said that, which surprises me. I was totally thinking this is just me being a design nerd and nobody else is going to be interested, but apparently I was wrong. So there is some interest out there. I will say thank you both for joining me. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit. I know we will see each other on various Discords and things like that. What have you each got coming up soon on your channels? Pimp your channel a little.
Well, first of all, thank you for for having us and inviting me to chat. I always love chatting, and it's hard to find the time, so I'm glad it worked out for this one. And this evening, I will be interviewing Caden Love, a debut author of The Elegy of a Fragmented Vineyard. So it's a political fantasy, a lot of philosophy mixed in with fantasy. So it should be an interesting chat. But
Cool title.
yeah, otherwise, I don't plan that far.
Very good. I don't either.
I don't plan much in terms of my videos, but I am ready to film soon a new tier list video that I think is fun because I haven't really seen it done anywhere else. But it's a series name tier list. Just how much do I love or dislike the name of the series?
Love it.
And not about the books themselves at all.
Have you seen my old video, which is a random fantasy book title generator?
I don't think so.
Go back and
No.
have a look. I forget exactly what it's called, but I can send you a message. I just realized that like I kept bumping into fantasy titles that were thing of thing,
Mm.
like Lord of the Rings, where it, I guess, sort of started.
Yeah.
But so many of the titles are that. So I did a thing where I just rolled dice and had two lists of things and just made up a bunch of different names to help
Oh,
authors
that's
out.
fun.
Yeah, it was a complete joke video. But yeah. Cool. Thank you both. I look forward to seeing your upcoming videos. Thank you, everyone who joined, watching, and in the chat. I didn't put up many of the comments in the chat because it can be kind of distracting when you're having a good conversation with people, but I do enjoy seeing them and I read all of the comments. And I will see you all later. Maybe tomorrow evening, well, evening my time, I think it's 2 p.m. EST for the Sunday Pub, which is every Sunday. See you all later.
See ya.